You've heard people fill space, correct? A couple of months ago, I was at a law firm. And you ever watch someone walk in the room and they just have executive presence? However, I know we all define it differently. But this woman enters the room. She walked in the room like she belonged there. She had one of those handshakes you'll never forget, and she looked you dead in the eye. And we're talking about brevity and trying to get to the point, be clear, concise. And at some point during that conversation, she was pretty quiet up to that day, point of the day, and she raised her hand. She decides she shares a story with us. She shares with us how she lives in Dallas. She was in New York, on the busy streets of New York, on the call with a client trying to flag down a cab. Well, a cab pulls up, she hops in that cab, and halfway to LaGuardia, she's on this call with the client. Prior to reaching LaGuardia, she concludes that call. And the cab driver peers in that rear view mirror and he asked her, "Can I give you feedback?" Can you imagine? You're sitting in the back seat of a cab and someone asks you for feedback? She goes, before I could even answer him, he goes on to say to her, "I figure I'll never see you again. Can I give you feedback?" She figured, what does he have to tell me? He goes on to say to her, "When you first got into my cab, you look like you have an important job. But," now you knew when the word "but" is out of context, what happens after the word "but"? It all goes downhill from there if you're not careful with how you're using it. Yes, we're talking about brevity. He goes on to say to her, "When you first got in my cab, you look like you have an important job. But when I heard you on the phone, I started to second guess what you do. You say and ah a lot. It takes you a long time to get to the point. And it was difficult to follow your conversation." You can't make this stuff up. So she said, fortunate for him, they reached LaGuardia. She can't toss that money over the cab seat fast enough. She hops out of the cab, slams the cab door. She finds herself aggressively walking down that airport terminal when it hits her. And she realized, well, wait a second. Perhaps my cab coach just told me what everyone is saying behind my back. A couple of months later, she drops me an email and she says, "You know, that feedback has changed the way people responded to me. One of the biggest challenges that people have is getting to the point. Can you relate? You're in a conversation and you're out in right field, you're out in left field, and you're wondering how the world you got there? Anyone?" And our subconscious says, keep talking, torture them even more, and eventually you will figure it out. One of the best ways to jeopardize your knowledge, one of the best ways to waste time are when we fill. Now, and ah, I bet if you make a commitment today, right now, by next week, Wednesday, just get rid of them. You don't want them, get rid of it. Here's where people don't realize is we say more than we need to say. If you could really net through your communication and eliminate the extra words, what you leave behind will always have more impact. Yet this is easier said than done. I want you to think of a comedian. I always think of a comedian when I talk about honor silence. Honor that brevity by trusting your competence. Every time you've seen a comedian in action, when they hit the punchline, what do? Because that's the experience. Can you imagine if they would never pause to allow you to laugh? I mean, why would you go? There'd be no purpose for you to be there. Communication is the same way. Put this in your front pocket. Start thinking and speaking in bullet point sentences. You are better to say nothing at all than to, you just gave it away that you don't know. I think we can be the smartest individuals in our industry. If it takes us too long to get to the point, it really does jeopardize our knowledge.